Liverpool 3, Newcastle 2. First of all, what a game. That game was absolutely insane. I actually thought Newcastle were the better team for most of the game, and in the second half, you would think that Liverpool had one less player, with the fight that Newcastle showed on the pitch to make it 2-2 was incredible from Newcastle. Bruno Guimaraes for proper captain's performance, and I actually thought that Newcastle were going to go and win it. And then there was a part of me that went, this is Liverpool. You can never write off Liverpool. They always find a way. And when I saw Ngumoha come on, there's a part of me that went, this kid's going to score the winner. Like, I watched him in pre-season. He is an absolute baller, and what a moment for the kid. But look, guys, we're going to break down this game. I've got a lot of notes. I want to talk about the match. We'll talk about Rio. Obviously, Szoboszlai was phenomenal. We're going to talk about him. We will talk about Bert. Probably wasn't his best game. Kirkus probably wasn't his best game. But I do think long term, give them time to bed in, they will be good for Liverpool. But yeah, it wasn't their best game. Konate looks off it. I want to talk about Newcastle because I think there's a lot of positives for Newcastle. I know Newcastle got 1 point in 6 games, but look, away to Villa, home to Liverpool, 10 men. You know, Newcastle showed a lot of promising signs. We'll talk about that. I think Eddie Howe, Newcastle, for everything that's going on off the pitch, they did so well. I think Bruno Guimaraes really led by example today. Isaac will be watching that, seeing what a real leader is, and I can see why the Newcastle fans love Bruno Guimaraes. Ekitike going under the radar. All the noise about Isaac, all the noise going on at the moment, Ekitike is going under the radar. Bruno G. We'll talk about a lot of things. Obviously, I want to give Szoboszlai a lot of credit, but like my general thoughts on the game was Liverpool have immense quality in the final third. I thought Dominic Szoboszlai was excellent. I thought Hugo Ekitike was fantastic. I thought Gravenberch was good. I think McAllister was a miss. I think Van Dijk was very good, but the rest of the defence was just... But I thought that Newcastle gave it so much fight. You could tell it was the Isaac derby. This was more than just a game for Newcastle. It was the Isaac derby. It meant something. You could feel that game meant something. There was a lot of fight. It almost felt like a final at times, and Anthony Gordon was very stupid going in on Van Dijk like that. But this game gave, and I felt at times Newcastle for a lot of the game with a better side, but they didn't have the striker. They couldn't convert the chances. They came through set pieces where Liverpool were bad, and considering Liverpool have got Arsenal next, they will want to improve on the set pieces. But the thing about Liverpool is they have elite level quality. Even when Liverpool aren't at their best, even when players like Salah didn't have a good game, Salah only needs one moment. He only needs one moment to make something happen. Gakpo, even if he's not having his best game, he can get goals and assists. Ekitike was very good today, but again, he's got immense quality. Florian Wirtz hasn't had the best 2 games for Liverpool yet, but they're 2 very difficult games, 2 very physical games, and we know what Florian Wirtz is about, elite quality. So I feel like with Liverpool, even though they don't play their best, they've got that elite quality to get them over the line, to get them the winner today. The Szoboszlai step over, leaving it for Rio. The intelligence of Liverpool was there, and where Liverpool won the game was just technical and intelligence. Newcastle were there physically. Newcastle were winning the fights. Newcastle winning the duels. Newcastle were the better team for me, and I think there was more positives for Newcastle to take, but it will be horrible for Newcastle to not get the 3 points. But Liverpool players had more of a brain. Liverpool players were just technically better. There was times when Newcastle got the ball and they were wasteful, and the lack of focal point wasn't there, if you want my honest opinion. But look, let's talk about young Rio Ngumoha. First of all, big up to Slot for taking a risk and bringing this guy on. There's going to be no harder game than St James's Park. I think St James's Park is one of the hardest stadiums to go away to, especially in recent years. This Newcastle side is very physically dominant, and even with 10 men, you wouldn't have known it today. They're up for it. They will fight. I don't think there's a team that fights more than that Newcastle side. It's going to be a tough game. He was fantastic in pre-season. He deserved his chance to get on, and Slot took that risk, making him the 4th youngest scorer in Premier League history. And look, he's not just about the goal today. We've seen him in pre-season getting goals, getting assists, but dribbles, taking on his man 1v1. Chelsea will be looking at that after they spend 100 million on another youngster, thinking, should we have given this guy a chance? Because he is mint. And I actually said in one of my post-match reactions to one of your pre-season games that Rio Ngumoha was just signing off the summer last summer. He was just signing on the summer last summer. But look, brilliant composure in the 100th minute to win it. You could rush at that, you could snatch at that. The way that Szoboszlai left it, my man of the match today, Szoboszlai, and he puts it in the back of the net. And look, as much as I didn't want Liverpool to win, and as much as I was rooting for Newcastle, I think Newcastle deserved it. It's always nice to, I think, see a young guy score. I think if someone was going to score that winner, it's always nice to see it. The young kid, is it Premier League debut for him even? I don't know. Like, for me, fair play to him. And he sent a message to Arne Slot, you can trust me, bring me on. Look what I can do in big games, bring me on. And look, we saw really good flashes in pre-season. And that winner, the confidence it will give the kid as well. It will mean Arne Slot will take more risks to play the kid. kid, like it's going to do a lot of things. And look, Rio Ngumoha, remember the name. You know, there's a lot of good youngsters in football, but there's just a different level of youngster when you look at the likes of Rio Ngumoha, you look at Max Dowman. They're just sort of different levels. Esteval, Rio Ngumoha, Max Dowman, they're different levels. We talk about like Tyreek George, good youngster, but he's not the level of an Esteval. You know, he might be a little bit better because he's older, but Max Dowman and Rio Ngumoha will probably be better than him for me. You know, there's a lot of good youngsters in football, but sometimes you meet one and you see one, you think they're an elite level. And one at the moment for me that's annoying me is Kobbie Mainoo, because when Kobbie Mainoo had his breakout season 2 years ago, he was so good. And for some reason, Amrin doesn't know how to use him. And I honestly think it'd be the stupidest thing Man United do if they sell him. But Rio Ngumoha is one of those that he just catches your eye instantly. Like Trey Ione is good, don't get me wrong, fantastic player, but there's just something different about Rio. All right, let's continue on into some more notes because I do want to talk about Newcastle and other things. But we have to give credit to Dominic Szoboszlai, man of the match performance at right back today. First of all, Liverpool cannot play like that versus Arsenal. Liverpool were not physical enough. I almost felt like they went 2-0 up against 10 men and thought it was going to be easier and maybe underestimated Newcastle. They weren't good at set pieces. Arsenal are the team that even if they don't play well, they'll get a set piece, score part of the bus, and then you've got to break them down. Arsenal are going to be physical. Arsenal got a lot more quality on the pitch this season. Arsenal are very good in the set pieces. So Liverpool have got to make sure they're on it versus Arsenal. They've got to make sure they are on it versus Arsenal. Because if they play like that versus Arsenal, I think Arsenal could win, especially with the set piece defending. Kanate has got to wake up. But one guy that was unbelievable for Liverpool every time they played a big six side last season was Szoboszlai. Szoboszlai's stats versus the big six sides in the big games was a different level because he's so physically good. He's such a workhorse. And sometimes at the highest level, it's about just beating them physically. And Szoboszlai can do that. But today he filled in at right back and he put in a shift. For me, he was everywhere, driving up and down, getting involved. I think Newcastle made the game physical. And I think, you know, players like Wirtz who are really good technically, I think struggled to deal with the physicality of the game. So to have Szoboszlai physically imposing himself, winning back the ball, putting a bit of intensity into a Liverpool side who weren't playing as intensely as Newcastle was key. But his work rate, his passing, his ability to cover ground, the step over to create space for Rio's goal, manipulate the defenders. He looked like the leader, the workhorse. He was technically quite good. And look, Szoboszlai is always key in big games for Liverpool. He always shows up. And for me, he's got to start versus Arsenal. I actually think that Szoboszlai, McAllister, Gravenberch, if they're all available, should be on midfield three versus Arsenal. That is your best midfield three. You know that works. Now, I'm not saying that Florian Wirtz is a flop. I'm not saying that Florian Wirtz isn't going to work. And I think Florian Wirtz will no doubt be one of your best players. He's an elite level player with elite level quality. I'm not worried about Florian Wirtz. But I think Newcastle at St James's Park and Arsenal are two of the most physical games you're going to get in the Premier League. A different level of physicality to the Bundesliga. This isn't the game for Florian Wirtz versus Arsenal. You know, you could argue the same for Kirkus. They have fantastic players that I think will be fantastic signings for Liverpool, but I don't think Arsenal is the game for them. I could be wrong. Florian Wirtz could play. He could put in a man of the match performance. He's got such elite quality that you give Florian Wirtz a bit of the ball and let him play one pass and he can do something crazy. There's an elite level quality in Florian Wirtz. Don't get me wrong. But look, just because he's had 2 poor games doesn't mean he's going to be a flop. It doesn't mean he's going to be a flop one bit. You know, Haaland had his first game for City was poor. People called him a flop. Obviously broke the record that year. You know, with Florian Wirtz, I know he will be good for Liverpool. It might take time for him to bed in, just get used to the league, get to fitness, get involved. I also think the games, Bournemouth and obviously today, are not easy games. I think when you get the Burnleys and the Leeds and the Brentfords, it will be a little bit easier for him. But I do think Florian Wirtz will be a success, but I do think if Bradley's fit and everyone's fit, I would play Szoboszlai in the 10 versus Arsenal because of how good he was in the big games. Manchester United, Arsenal, last season. At the end of the day, the most important thing for Liverpool was the 3 points. That was the most important thing. And had they not got the 3 points today, especially going 2-0 up against 10 men, that wouldn't have been good because the performance wasn't good either. But it was the fact that they got the 3 points. While the performance was bad, they got the 3 points. That's the most important thing. But there was definitely concerns. There was definitely elements of you've got to get Mark Gay. Kanate was poor. This is another poor game from Kanate. And while I don't think he's had loads of protection from the midfield, his head looks in Madrid. Kirkus was being targeted, and I think he'll be targeted by Arsenal. I think Kirkus is a good player, but I think physically he got targeted a little bit, and that's something that, you know, you might have to watch. I thought the set piece defending was poor, and I think without McAllister, you lack control. You've not played a game this season with your best midfield three. And people always spoke about how good Salah was last season, the numbers, Van Dijk last season, but one of the reasons Liverpool won the league, and probably the main reason, was the midfield three of Szoboszlai, McAllister and Gravenberch. It was so good, it was so key, and I think that is obviously a big thing. But right now, Liverpool are conceding 2 goals a game on average. Konate's head isn't there. They need Gay in. They need Gay in more than Isak right now. You need Gay in more than Isak. You could even do with another midfielder to cover Gravenberch for depth, if we're going to be honest. And of course, you will need Isak for depth. I think young Rio and Chiesa was good options on the bench, but you will need that extra level in attack, particularly if an injury happens. Salah going to AFCON. Look, Salah was bad today, but we know what Salah can do. Gakpo got 2 assists. Ekitike was phenomenal. But look, there's a lot of areas of concerns for Liverpool. And I think as well, I felt that Liverpool underestimated Newcastle at many times. We've got to talk about Newcastle. They were down to 10 men, but they dominated physically. In the second half, particularly from like the 60th minute onwards, I think, yes, for the goal, maybe Newcastle could have got back. They could have done better right at the end, the last minute. But you cannot fault Newcastle. If I was a Newcastle fan, I'd gutted, I'd be upset, I'd be distraught. But you cannot fault the work rate and the effort from Newcastle. The fact that I would have been able to tell that Newcastle had one less man on the pitch is crazy, because if someone had said to me just from watching that second half, which team has 10 men, I would have thought Liverpool, because Newcastle were very physically dominant in the midfield. They were very imposing. And I think St. James's Park almost was the 11th man for them to make it 11v11, because I thought St. James's Park was incredible today, but I thought Bruno Guimaraes was a leader. Alexander Isak is acting out, and I will say Alexander Isak probably hasn't been treated the best and lied to by those at the top of Newcastle, but he's let down his teammates. Alexander Isak has let down his teammates, he's let down his fans, he's let down his manager. Those at the top, yes, they should have dealt with the Isak situation better. Yes, they should have let Isak go way earlier in the window. Don't get me wrong, the Alexander Isak situation has not been dealt with well by those at the top of Newcastle, but I feel like Alexander Isak let his teammates down today. He let the fans down today, he let Eddie Howe down today, because Bruno Guimaraes was there giving everything for Newcastle, giving 100 million% for Newcastle, showing how much he cares about Newcastle, and he was a real example, because I thought Newcastle did well. I thought that Newcastle a lot of the times outworked Liverpool duels. They were there to the second balls, they were there to transition, they were there to work. And I think while Gravenberch did well, considering it was on a yellow and Szoboszlai was excellent, I felt that Newcastle were better in a lot of areas of the pitch. Bruno Guimaraes got his goal, he showed his leadership. I thought Dan Burn put in a strong shift. I think obviously there's so many blows to Newcastle throughout the match. Tonali coming off, Joelinton coming off, Shah coming off. That's 3 important players, and if those 3 are injured, like, Newcastle could be in trouble depth-wise. I said depth in their midfielders is slim, but the lack of 9, the lack of focal point, holding them back. It was absolutely holding them back, because I sometimes think Newcastle get to the final third, particularly in the Aston Villa game, and they just don't know what to do with it, or they don't have that focal point, and they don't have that guy that's going to put the ball in the back of the net. And that could be the difference between Newcastle having 1 and 6 points right now, and those 5 points at the end of the season could be the difference between Champions League football or not. Continuing on, Eddie Howe's side definitely need another striker. They created enough to score more, but they couldn't score. Over the last 2 games, they've created enough to score more goals than they have. Obviously, there's some injuries there. Newcastle have got to go and perform in the transfer window. You've got to go and back Eddie Howe and perform. And look, I want some final notes on the likes of Ekitike. I think he's going massively under the radar, Ekitike, because of the Isak noise, because of everything going on. He's got 3 goals and 1 assist in 3 games, which is an unbelievable start for Liverpool. He's got movement, link-up play, post in front of goal. He's doing really well. Like, he rejected Newcastle for Liverpool. He was getting hounded. He was getting booed by the stadium. And this is the Isak derby, and he was doing fine in this, what I would call, hostile environment. You can see how technically gifted he is. And I think because of the pitch noise, because of the off-the-pitch noise, Isak, because of everything else going on, how chaotic the game was, Rio Ngumoha's winner, that nobody's noticing how good Ekitike's been. When you're a striker, all you're being asked to do is come in and score goals. And he's doing that, but he's also playing well on top of scoring goals, but he's also a young player. And most strikers need time to bed in, and he's not showing like he needs time to bed in. And obviously, again, a big shout out to Bruno Guimaraes. I thought he was a true leader. I thought he was outstanding, holding the tempo, winning the duels, driving Newcastle forward. He just forced spark, forced a comeback, and he rallied that team on. After the Gordon's red, he rallied that team on. He was the extra man. St. James's Park was fantastic. They were the extra man, and what a leader. So yeah, these are my final takeaways. Liverpool weren't great, but they have the quality to win a game, and that bailed them out today. There's cracks there. They must be fixed. Newcastle, well, they have the spirit. They need the striker. Rio Ngumoha, what a moment for him. Ekitike and Szoboszlai were Liverpool standout performers. And look, those are 3 points. When you're in a title race, all that matters is the points. And if Liverpool win the league by 1 point, that is the moment they can look back at. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.